this is such a broad topic, and then see where the discussion goes from there. So, in your guys' opinions and from your guys' experience, what are some main so-called scale-up killers that you guys have encountered throughout your journeys? So I guess I'll start right here with Zikry, and we'll go down.
Yo, hey everybody, it's been a long day. Hoping that this panel will be a very, very kick-ass one. So let's live up the expectation and get to it. Scale-up killers. I'm in an industry where we're trying to deal with issues that most humanitarian sectors and CSR in general are dealing with. For those who don't know, I'll just give you some numbers. In the humanitarian sector, who here has donated to UNICEF or all of these donations from WWF? Raise your hand, I just want to see. All right. What if I told you 80% of the funds you gave are not going to the beneficiaries, which is actually an open secret. Not many people like to talk about it. I might get in trouble. Apparently, I don't really care because I think everyone has a battle to fight for, so that's why I'm talking about this particular issue. So 80% goes to overhead costs, agencies. You see UNICEF trying to raise money from you guys trying to subscribe. Well, there's an agency behind that, and they take about 30%, sometimes less, from the fund that they are supposed to use for the program. And this is some of the issues that we're facing, and one of the trends is there's a decrease of people donating because people are losing trust in NGOs that we're trying to fund. So where do we come in here? So as an incitement, as what I've done, what we've done, we've been trying to look at connecting brands. We're trying to educate corporate companies that your CSR is not just this one-time mock check, paint school kind of thing. It's a philosophy that embodies with the business. Because nowadays there's a huge trend that's changing. If you don't know, in Europe has been one of the biggest watchdogs on making sure corporate companies don't do anything that is polluting environment, making sure human rights are respected. Same in the US. So the problem here is, the issue here is we're trying to get more channels for real social enterprises and NGOs who are doing really good stuff to get more channels for funds. And the issue here is there's not much trust going on between those two. So for us, why I call this a scale-up killer, from my point of view, is the fact that there's a lot of also NGOs or social enterprises, they are just unreliable. They may not see on paper. You can read all the CSR impact reports or any impact report you see, but they're outdated. By the time you want to read them, it's from last year. So how do we know that this impact is ongoing, continuously? And for God's sake, it's 2018 and we can't even solve one of the smallest problems. It's not just mindset, it's also the fundamental needs that we've been trying to do. And it just, for someone like me, it riles me up because, we see this every single day. No one likes to be part of this problem. But 1/3 of this world is involved in dark economy. So that means they don't have access to banks, they don't have access to proper loans they can, they're exploited in many, many ways. And the other thing here is the fact that, I'm sorry I'm taking a little bit more time, but the other thing here is a lot of startups, corporate companies, they look at developing and developed market to penetrate, right? That's the common needs. But you have another 1/3 who are just left behind, who you can't put purpose before profits. So living in this world where sharing economy is getting bigger, transparency is becoming more accessible. There is a need on using blockchain. I'm not a technical person, but using blockchain on our end is more or less to measure who is reliable and who's not on making sure the impact works. And the beauty about blockchain is every users, any different kind of users can be involved. So instead of just doing your own impact report that happens once a year with hundreds of pages, which I doubt people read it, why not make it live and make sure that it's verified by beneficiaries you're trying to impact. So for example, if you're going to plant 1 million trees to a few areas in Borneo, you want to make sure there's 1 million trees, not 10,000 trees. There's a lot of projects in Southeast Asia that people don't really talk about. I don't know why they don't make it in headlines, because it's not sexy enough for people to read it, obviously. You see a lot of solar projects that just die They get the tender, they put the solar stuff at the village, which is about maybe 10 hours by drive, by boat, by flight, and they just leave it there. So where's the accountability there? So with blockchain, with a lot of either using the smart contracts and so forth, there's many ways we can be more accountable. And a lot of people say transparency is the answer to the whole social cause and donation. Actually, it's one of the many problems. The other thing is, like I mentioned, is reliability. How sure are we that this NGO is reliable enough to make it happen? And lastly is impact reporting. I mean, impact reporting should no longer be 100 pages. No one has time for that stuff. It's better if it's live, concise, and good enough for people to just pull it up and read it. And at the same time, empower the beneficiaries. Because there's a lot of ICOs that I've seen, like there's one that was just doing about diamonds. But why not empower those miners who are mining diamonds, you know? I think they're not in the case. It's more like, how do I know if my diamonds is authentic? You know, that kind of thing. Oh, with blockchain we can do that. But you have people who are mining diamonds. So where is the incentive to help those kind of people? So that's why I feel where we can, you know, kill off a lot of NGOs will not like it because they have to come up with the truth. Like if the project's $100,000. Yeah. Let me just wrap this up. I'll wrap it up. So if it's a $100,000 project, you know, you never know. It might just cost $20,000. So that's what you do with blockchain, and so forth. So that's where I'm coming here to have, and I thank BlocFest for having me here because that's why I'm trying to relay, especially with this topic, and love to hear more from the.
So we'll certainly come back to that because you touched on a lot of points. But then moving on to Viola, as we continue discussing this theme, the general question again to start is, what are some major hindrances, you know, scale of killers that affect your industry, and how can blockchain help with that?
Okay, hi guys, my name is Viola, very happy to be here today. So maybe before I start, can I just have a quick show of hands of those of you who are married and attached? Okay, thank you. So I can safely assume the rest of you are single and available? Okay, it does not matter because actually for Viola, whatever your relationship status is, you can use Viola. So coming back to the question, you know, what I want to address is that we actually have been in the dating industry for the last 14 years. We started off as a brick and mortar business. So what that means is like, it's, you know, sort of like a traditional matchmaking company where clients will come to our office for a face-to-face chat. That means we'll actually verify them in person. We'll verify their identity documentation. And then after that, we'll actually know who they are. And since we started in Singapore, you can even check out their marital status. So for that reason, a lot of users are very comfortable with using our service because they know that whoever they meet are really who they say they are. So fast forward 14 years. So right now, you know, like we have a lot of dating apps in the market. Like in fact, we ourselves have dating apps as well. So one of the biggest challenges with dating app is actually scammers, love scammers. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the love scamming industry, it's not just $1 million industry, it's $1 billion industry. And these are not just, you know, like any Tom, Dick, and Harry sitting at home and, you know, like scamming people. These are syndicates because this is big business. So with this happening, a lot of users, a lot of, you know, like singles going online to find love are actually being scammed. But the other part of the story, which is probably a deep dark secret of our industry, and many of you are not aware of it, is that the industry players themselves, some of them are actually scamming the users as well. So they are creating bots to actually entice the users to use the app. So why do they do that? It's quite simple actually if you think about it, because you know, like the churn rate for users who go onto dating app is very short. It's actually just between 2 to 4 months. So imagine you spend so much money to acquire this lead, and then within 2 to 4 months, if they do not pay, then it's gone. Or like let's say you do so well, your app is so fantastic, and then this person actually finds love, that means he's gone as well. You know, like there's not much repetitive business in that sense. So as a result, they are thinking, what's the best way to kind of get these people to pay? So just now, you know, I asked like who's married, who's attached, and you know the rest of you are single and available. So imagine if you have a single guy, you know, like he is sincere, serious, and looking for love, and then he go online, and because you know, like for online dating and mobile dating, there tend to be more men. It's actually 70% men and 30% women. So a lot of times when men actually message the women, they do not get a response. But imagine it's like you go on the app and then immediately you get this message. And, the lady is like, oh, like, John, do you want to have dinner tonight? So, as a dating professional for the last 14 years, my advice to you is if you're a single guy and you get such a message, chances are this is a bot or a scammer, because no normal single lady would actually use this as an opener. So, just coming back to, like you say, the problem. So obviously, what we have been doing on the brick and mortar side of the business, that's going well, it's like we are helping people, it's genuine, it's authentic, and people come to us. But the challenge is that it's not very scalable. So if I want to enter a new market and I have to, start an office, I need to hire, a group of professional matchmakers. It's all good, but our objective, our BHAG is actually to create 1 million happy marriages. It's just going to take me forever if I want to do this and just opening one branch at a time. So with blockchain, what we are doing with our Viola project is actually to use it as a way of verifying the identity of these users. So with what we are calling Real ID, we are actually verifying the photo against a real-time video scan, as well as against their social media as well. So if all of this is a match, then we will hash that result onto the blockchain. So at least with this, now clients can be assured that whoever they are talking to is really who they say they are, and not just another fake photo that is taken from online, or it could be a bot. So this is one of the use cases that we are using for blockchain in the love industry.
All right, thank you, Viola. So we'll move on to Ross.
Yes, thank you. Well, I believe number one killer of scaling up is government regulation. And I believe in the last, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, if you look at the most interesting companies that came out, were not really compliant with the regulation, like Skype or Airbnb and many others. With regard to regulations, there are three major issues. One, I believe it's basically a hidden tax on the market. And that's exactly what's been going on with the crypto markets recently, where you have all kinds of people talking about more fees and crypto tax and stuff like that. The second issue is that regulation is basically stifling innovation, and you can see it in a very interesting fact with a revolving door between the incumbents and the regulators, where you have basically resources and money and a lot of effects going on to regulation, where people go, excuse me, where basically the regulators help the incumbents and the traditional companies to stifle innovation and ring-fence their actual businesses around regulation. And I believe these are the major issues right now with scaling up blockchain, because if we are going to have too stringent of a regulation, the actual innovation and disruption of blockchain is going to be hindered by that.
Thank you. And then finally, Chris, to close out this question.
So actually, I think our panelists have mentioned quite a few points. But from my company experience, when we try to develop some blockchain application, one of the scalability killers, you go back to the very basics one. The original infrastructure foundation is very key. Because sometimes, when you try to come up with a solution for blockchain, for something, sometimes you look too direct into the solution and try to come up with a solution, the challenge, and try to come up with a solution. But you have to think a bit further down the road when suddenly maybe you have like 1,000 user, 10,000 user. What's the architecture gonna look like, and how's the system, how the network gonna carry all of that load? Because a lot of actually my project, when we first tried to run it, we didn't think about it. So when we hit midway of the rolling out and try to do demo and everything, we see that problem. So we actually have to go back all the way to 0.0 and start on the new infrastructure again. So it's really go back to the basics, that you have to think long run in the beginning for the scalability challenge. Yeah.
So the common theme that I'm hearing among all of you guys is that in all of your disparate and separate industries, one of the major blocks of scaling up is our efficiency challenges that stem from legacy structures of your industry. Perhaps there's that inertia that has to be overcome, whether you're in the charity industry, whether you're in fintech, whether you're looking at something like dating. So, however, when we challenge these legacy inefficiencies, I feel that some of them have been accrued for good reason in the first place, and there might have been overreach when it came to that. For example, in the case of a lot of money from charities not going to their actual causes, I think for the American Cancer Association, for example, only 10% of the donated funds actually go to research. And the CEO of the ACA, I actually think, has a salary of around $1.8 million a year. Well, the salary is ridiculous, but then these nonprofits have also ballooned because of the challenges of the industry, the size of the admin staff and whatnot. And in the case of government regulations, they may have overstepped extremely the other way, but they were instituted initially, perhaps when other industries were more dominant, to protect people. And in the case of Uber, some of the ride-sharing startups, we have seen the challenges when there is no clear regulation in place, such as with driver security, background checks. So, in your minds, how do you guys feel? What do you guys think would be a measured, controlled way of incorporating blockchain one step at a time to revolutionize your various respective industries? I guess we'll start with Chris on the other end, and then go back this way.
Can you give me 30 seconds to think?
Yeah. Sure. So I come from a finance and energy trading background, and we mainly deal with commodities trading, carbon emissions. And the way we could scale up our business, which is extremely inaccessible and centralized and expensive to be at. Right now, there are probably only around 60 or maybe 70 different brokers in the world that deal with carbon emissions in the mandatory markets. Most of them are large brokers, large banks, large institutions, and it's completely inaccessible close to the rest of the population. And through blockchain, we were actually able, especially with carbon emissions and commodities, create a technology, purchase exchange, and DApps, purchase exchange, which democratize these kind of investments for everybody. I believe one of the best use cases for blockchain is to democratize investing and make them available for everybody, not only to 1% of the population, accredited investors, qualified investors. And that's exactly the dynamic we're playing out with the purchase exchange, where we're trying to bring commodity space, carbon emissions, and believe me, there are very interesting investments as well, because if you look at just the main carbon emission market products called EUA out of Europe, it's a $2 trillion liquidity play a year. It's actually a huge market. It appreciated in the last year from $4 to $25 as we speak now. So there are many opportunities which only large institutions, large banks can tap into, and I believe that should be open to everybody, not only to accredited investors.
All right, so then moving to Viola, with respect to scaling up your operations, my question, a particular question there would be, how do you do that while still acknowledging, privacy, security of users? So, in the case where who that person is, how do you balance that such that that this guy you're talking to is a genuine person, but then you also still don't have access to all of his data, and you can guarantee that that person's information is protected?
Okay, so the way we are seeing it is that we will only be hashing the status, but whether it's verified or not verified. But the rest of the information is still decentralized because obviously like people might feel not safe if their information is being out there. But actually like just going back to the initial question that you have asked, like how do we kind of slowly introduce it into the industry as well, because I mean obviously it's something different and like sometimes it will take time to kind of adopt it. So what we have done is that our project Viola.ai is not just a B2C, it's also a B2B. So what we have realized that a lot of times like maybe it's just much easier to I would say introduce it from a B2B point of view, because like there's more I would say interest for a business to take it up. So how we are doing it is on the platform we are actually also linking up like other matchmakers and also like dating coaches, relationship coaches onto the platform and to be matched with users. Yeah, because of course like users like they come onto our platform to be matched, but at the same time they can also come onto our platform to get I would say more in-depth services. They might realize that maybe I need a dating coach, maybe I need a professional matchmaker to help me with this. So that's how one of our earlier speakers were talking about. So that's where we feel that that's where our tokenomics can come in as well. And from there, like when people are more familiar and more the accessibility or the understanding is they are more comfortable, then it's going to roll over more to the B2C side.
So then, Zikry, I guess in your particular case of charities and non-profits, so I'm curious about this. How have these 80% cost margins have come to be? Like, what reasons led to this? And then through blockchain, how are you? What's I guess a stepwise means of using blockchain, a timeline for cutting down that margin?
It's been a very traditional route for a lot of non-profit organizations globally. It's the best practice. It's been like that for 40, 50 years. In many cases, like if the European Union funded a African country when the democratization of the bureaucracy isn't as efficient, there's many cases where they will just fake like a document saying this money is for smartphones for the government servants, but not a single smartphone was being given, and this thing is just slipped out of the way because everything's on paper. But when you put things on digital information, it gets interesting, and yet you still can filter, hiding your whatever secret agenda and so forth. In our terms, when it comes to blockchain, it's more about the accountability that allows, say, for example, a corporate company like Coca-Cola wants to fund a social impact project by hiring or funding a very prominent NGO. Now, a prominent NGO would sometimes, some of them are really good at marketing. They may overpromise and underdeliver. In this case, that's why you have a feature like smart contracts where you add specific milestones, key driving inputs, objective key results, and for each milestone they don't hit, then you know that they're not saying what they're saying. You should be doing the opposite. If you are the service provider or product owner, you should be always under promise and over delivering. I think that's the best common practice for many businesses. Apple does this really well, even though I don't really like the new iPhone, and so forth. And many brands do that really well. They really under promise and over deliver. So with blockchain, you can do that. Another thing is, there's a lot of hype with this whole UN SDG, where our brands are becoming more conscious with the environment, or are being more selfless. And there's a really cool initiative in Norway where they're trying to look at any, I wouldn't say mistakes, but any PR disaster that could be used, especially if it's harming human rights, if it's under-delivering on providing the right necessities for labor workers in the Emirates, for example. You have that kind of issue sometimes. So then you can put and rank brands, which brands are the most givable, the most impactful in terms of where have they solving the problems. Because my solution is the corporate companies are the key players of solving world problems, not actually non-profits. We are just making noises because no one's taking action. But if you really think about resources, if you really think about who could manage all of these things, it's a corporate company, like as big as Nestle, or as big as, name any company that you know that's big and monsters, Unilever, all these guys, because they have infrastructure, just like what Viola was sharing just now. They have resources, they have the expertise, they have the skill set, and that's where there's a need. And Richard Branson said this perfectly. In the next brands who survive in the next 2-3 decades from now on are brands who put purpose first and profit second, because of the trend that we're seeing. One thing you can test right now is go to Bali, go to the sea, look at how many straws and plastics with brands on them. The best way to put them accountable is just take a photo and tag them. That's a way to kind of get them. That's why this whole influx of brands trying to say, I don't want any straws, or we're not doing any more straws anymore, or plastic. It's because they're following the trend. Like it or not, that's how it is. We dictate how things are, and they try to accommodate. They adapt, they adopt, and adapt. That's the game.
Right, so back to Chris.
Yeah, it took me a while to really choose an application from our portfolio to share. So as QRC, our focus is RegTech, so regulation technology. So a lot of the application we have to touch on the area where scalability is a problem. One of the example is KYC. KYC, you know, if you actually go to banks and working with banks before, you will understand that KYC is actually a very painful process, as well as a very costly process as well. So we have come up with basically a very simple KYC tool on blockchain. Basically, we encourage people to register with this KYC tool, and whenever you go to see banks or government or hospital that also connected to this database, all they have to do is just kind of scan the QR code on your applications, and the record from you is pulling toward that agency. So how is it different from the current system? Right now, the reason why the cost and the time to process the KYC is so long and so expensive, because there are only a few vendors out there control the database and have much of the data on there. So we try to bring that exactly model, but more to like for everyone to use, and everyone is having a phone right now. So just with the phone, they can easily register their information on there, and depends on the industry, depends on the usage they want to use, they can allow different function with that. And to really encourage the scalability, we even reward the personal user to register on the application, and in return they get rewards in tokens or some sort of other stuff that they can use those tokens to pay if, let's say, they use our KYC tool to do something else. So they already have the currency to do that. So that's kind of the tokens economics that we built for that.
Got it. So I think a really cool thing about these panels that as we talk more and more, it's clear that there's synergies between everybody. So thinking about climate nonprofits right now, and then how just with climate change being a bigger issue, carbon credits are potentially a corporate-driven means of making things more climate friendly. So I think as I look at the interconnections between all you guys, the other thing I'm wondering about is when you guys are applying these things, obviously there's different laws, local jurisdictions, and there's challenges in deploying blockchain tech internationally. So also with Violet, what works in terms of matchmaking and dating in Singapore, Asian countries in which there's more data, may not be more acceptable in something like say Texas, where individual personal freedoms are the number one thing. And then right, Chris, with regards to just with regards to the design and application of your awards, your token awards from region to region. What are some regional challenges, I guess, you guys foresee in terms of deploying these blockchain solutions globally? I'll start with Ross this time.
Well, particularly with commodities markets, it's a highly regulated market, probably most out of all except for the banking industry. carbon emissions, well, there are two different markets. One is mandatory, where Virtus operates in for the last, has been operating for the last 13 years, and then there is a voluntary one, which is quite tiny, and it's voluntary as its name implies. The biggest issue is that the market is fragmented into 16, maybe 17 different ETS schemes or emissions trading schemes, and each jurisdiction has its own rules, has its own product, has its own price. Prices ranging from $1 per ton all the way to $100 per ton. It's basically a huge mess. So through blockchain, you can actually eliminate and smoothen out these differences in jurisdictions, because we've been able to create something like a composite, an index in many different commodities that is basically traded on blockchain or decentralized dApp. And that hasn't been able, we weren't able to do this with the existing platforms and regulations. So actually blockchain enabled us to eliminate these kind of regional differences, especially in carbon trading and commodities trading. So thank God for that.
So I am a bit curious about that, because even how a carbon credit is defined may change from place to place. For example, I mostly know how it's defined in California, which I think is the only state that's doing cap and trade, carbon trading. But then so it's I guess I'm wondering how it's possible to ignore how blockchain makes it possible to ignore those differences when those jurisdictions still have enforcement power, be it California or Europe.
Sure, it's a very good question. Well, in order for you as a regular investor to take part in carbon emissions trading in mandatory markets, for example in California, you have to be compliant with several rules in registration. First of all, you have to have an emissions account open, which is not easy at all. You have to have some kind of experience in carbon trading. You have to have a certain amount of history, certain amount of volumes. Then you have to commit to a certain amount of volumes trading on the exchange. So it's completely inaccessible market to the public. But with blockchain or our platform or dApps, whatever you want to name it, you're able to tap into the price of the existing carbon in particular jurisdictions. So we're basically just tying the price, the product to the price of the particular market. So you are actually just taking part of the appreciation of the price. You don't really care about the underlying commodity that much. You don't have to own it. You have to be registered, but you can take part on the growth in particular jurisdictions.
Got it. Interesting. So then, Viola, on this note, do you see your service as something that may be more limited regionally by privacy standards, different cultural standards, or do you see blockchain giving you a pathway towards international adoption? Maybe there's a way where you can make a more, for example, U.S.-friendly matchmaking product or something like that.
That's definitely a very good question. So because even before we embark onto like the blockchain or even the AI part of our business, there's already this I would say challenge in the sense that because dating is something that's very personal, it's very localized. So obviously it's different in every country or every nationality, every background, every culture. But interestingly, with like once we embark into blockchain, what we have realized is that it gave us a much bigger platform. So in the past, like it's quite difficult, for people like maybe from all around the world to understand what we are doing. But once we embark on this platform, actually it has given us a much bigger, I would say, pool of people to work with. And in fact, a lot of the people who are interested in our project are actually, like you say, people from the States, people from Europe, like markets that we are not even in currently. But of course, there are challenges, definitely, like I say, dating is something very personal. We do need to think of how are we going to really personalize it and customize it. But I think it's really a matter of like listening to the users and working with people on the ground as well. And the other part of it is also back to like B2B. So the B2B part of the business actually is we are going to actually launch it more from the States side, because that's where a lot of the matchmakers are, a lot of the dating coaches are, and we see that that's going to be a lot of activities there, and from there we'll learn to how to scale it across the rest of the countries.
Got it. So apologies to everybody. Initially, I thought I saw 1 in front of the 4, so I thought there's actually 14 minutes left. Looks like there's under 5. I think I'm supposed to, unfortunately, open things for questions under the 5-minute point. Sorry to Zikry, I know Chris about that. Should have kept a better look at the time. But yes, we'll open the floor to questions at this point. Thank you again to all the speakers for their excellent answers. I'll share things later. And
We have time for 1 question only at this time.
all right, let's make that a good one.
I think this is a question for Viola. You mentioned that bots are a big challenge in today's dating apps. What if today's dating apps started doing KYC before allowing people to get on the platform? Would that minimize the value proposition your blockchain is providing to the consumers?
I think that is possible, but at the same time, there is a reason why that's not being done. Because ultimately, for the people who are actually doing this, that's a huge conflict of interest. Yeah. So if you know what I'm saying, like why would they kill the revenue stream or business stream that they are currently doing? Yeah. But of course, like we are hoping that more and more of our industry players are going to come clean and like stop utilizing this not very ethical ways to actually make money from Zikrys. Thank you.
I have time for one more question, right? Because there's 2 minutes. One more question? All right, looks like no more questions. Well, thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for them.
Thank you again, and thank you, Wally, for all of your efforts throughout this conference. He's already moderated 2 whole panels by himself and given his own presentation, so we really appreciate you coming all the way for that. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Wally CA in particular, and of course all of our panelists. We only have 3 more sessions here at BlocFest in the Enterprise Room, so let's make it a good one. A reminder that we do have the Blockchain Forensic Summit, which is behind you in the other room, so a lot going on here as we reach the end of BlocFest Day 2.